Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? Pat here, back to do a redo of another How to Play video. And in this one, we'll be talking about my favorite character currently in Epic 7, Lionheart Cermia. It's been about a week since the Epic 7 World Championship wrapped up. And, well, Lionheart Cermia is kind of the MVP of that tournament when you look at the numbers. She boasted one of the highest, if not the highest win rate for a damage dealer in that event. And I noticed that there was a renewed interest in this character because several of you commented on my old video and also hit me up about it on Discord. And a quick look through my old How to Play Lionheart Cermia video kind of revealed my builds are kind of out of date for 2023, as I made that video about a month after the character released. So, considering the renewed interest in the character, and she's pretty top tier right now in all forms of PvP, I decided to update my How to Play guide for 2023. As always, you could expect a ton of depth within the guide. Hopefully you enjoy it. Let's start it off right with Cermia's stats. Lionheart Cermia is a light warrior of the Pisces zodiac symbol. Her stat line is unique to her. Taking a look at her stats, she has 966 attack, 668 defense, 5,663 health, 112 speed, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, no starting effectiveness, and 30% starting effect resistance. The standouts for the stat line are the defense, speed, and effect resistance. Defense and speed are slightly above average, while effect resistance is well above average. All of the other stats for Lionheart Cermia, however, are below average when compared to other 5 stars in Epic 7. As a bit of trivia before moving on to the skill section, in the Japanese dub of Epic 7, Cermia, as well as Lionheart Cermia, is voiced by the very famous Kana Ueda, who is most well known for voicing Rin Tosaka as well as all of her variants in the Fate franchise. You can also hear her as Rachel Alucard in the BlazBlue franchise. In the English dub of Epic 7, however, Cermia as well as Lionheart Cermia is voiced by the amazing Cermia Lee, who we've talked about several times here on the channel. She is also the English voice of Lilibet, Designer Lilibet, and Cerise. She voices a plethora of characters across multiple anime as well as video games. You can hear her as characters such as Lucy from Fairy Tail, Asuna from Sword Art Online, Makoto Nijima from Persona 5, Manon from Street Fighter 6, A2 from Nier Automata, and also Ayeka Jirai, or at least she's the current voice of it, in my favorite anime of all time, Tenchi Muyo. Currently, she is most well known for being alongside of Keanu Reeves and Idris Elba as the voice of V from Cyberpunk 2077 and its expansion, Phantom Liberty.
My turn now.
Lionheart Cermia's S1 is Can You Handle the Heat? You acquire 20 Fighting Spirit upon use. It has a 0.6x attack multiplier, as well as a 100% defense scaling multiplier. It grants Lionheart Cermia a speed buff for 1 turn.
Come on, I'll take you all down.
Lionheart Cermia's S2 passive is It's Far From Over. At the start of the first battle, Lionheart Cermia gains 40 Fighting Spirit. After an ally suffers an extra attack, counter attack, or dual attack, Lionheart Cermia will dispel all debuffs inflicted upon her and increase her combat radius by 20% before activating Shine. Shine is a non-attack skill that can only be activated once every 2 to 3 turns, depending on Molagora. Shine also grants a 2-turn defense buff, 2-turn effect resistance buff, and 50 Fighting Spirit to Lionheart Cermia. This is the passive skill that gives this character its identity. It lets you know exactly where you need to play Lionheart Cermia, and that's against enemies that have extra attacks, counter attacks, or dual attacks. Do note that there is a window between when you activate It's Far From Over and activate Shine, where you can actually still be debuffed. The cleanse is on It's Far From Over, but the buffs and the Fighting Spirit are on Shine, meaning that certain skills, such as with Solitarius Daydream, can still stun you in between this window, so do keep that in mind. Lionheart Cermia's S3 is her signature skill, the appropriately named I Am the Victor. Consumes 80 Fighting Spirit upon use, and you acquire 3 souls upon use. It is an AoE attack with a 0.5x attack multiplier, previously a 0.3x attack multiplier. It also has a 135% defense scaling multiplier. It penetrates 50% of all enemies' defense and grants Lionheart Cermia an extra turn after use.
I was born to be a hero. By my destiny, I will cut you down. Are you sure you can handle this?
Lionheart Cermia's Soulburn changes the multiplier on her S1, Can You Handle the Heat? It changes the multiplier to a 1x attack multiplier, as well as a 160% defense scaling multiplier. This is an excellent Soulburn to use at the cost of 10 souls to pick off a straggler that survived after her S3, I Am the Victor.
Yeah! Come on, I'll take you all down.
When it comes to Molagora priorities, I think you want to max either the S3, I Am the Victor first, or the S2, It's Far From Over, depending on your preference. For standard playstyles, I think it's the S2. For more aggressive playstyles, I think it is the S3, I Am the Victor. Since Lionheart Cermia's primary role is to be the damage carry for your team, and she offers no other real utility, I think it is imperative that you get this character to plus 15. With the conclusion of the 2023 Epic 7 World Championship, it became pretty apparent that Lionheart Cermia was the MVP DPS of the entire tournament, boasting one of the highest, if not the highest win rate for a DPS at 60%. She is a must-have character in a format that is dominated by characters like Conqueror Lilius and the rise of Navy Captain Landy. And I noticed that a lot of people were checking out my old How to Play Lionheart Cermia build, so I did a quick peek and saw my builds are kind of out of date on that one. And considering that Lionheart Cermia got a buff, had her multipliers changed a little bit, and now we are playing a completely different build than what we did in the past with the advent of the Destruction build on the Golden Rose artifact, it's a pretty good time to do an update. So, in the past, I will show you on screen now what we had for the old Lifesteal build and also the old Speed build. And as you can see, those numbers are kind of low by today's standards. For most people in like the, I want to say like Challenger to Champion rating, those numbers probably are not going to really cut it anymore. And if you're in like the Emperor or Legend tiers, they're going to need to be even a bit higher. So the first build that I want to talk about is obviously the breakout build of Worlds. It's the primary reason that we're doing a How to Play on Lionheart Cermia in the first place. And that is the Epic 7 World Championship 2023 Hyper DPS build here on our girl Lionheart Cermia. The primary stats are going to be Destruction as well as Defense as an offset, although Critical Hit Chance definitely works as well. Health or Immunity could also work here, but I think for most people, either Defense set from Golem or Critical Hit Chance set from Wyvern is going to be the best option for you. Looking at our desired stats, we have 1686 attack. This is essentially Lionheart Cermia's base attack with an I-90 weapon as well as the recommended artifact, which will be Golden Rose. For defense, I have 2k, although I highly recommend going to 2100 if you are able to do so, or even 2200 if you have really, really good gear. The highest ones have around 2400. In the past, we talked about 1900 defense being a pretty good ballpark for Lionheart Cermia. That was good about a year ago. 1900 is very low on the scale, I feel like, nowadays for Lionheart Cermia. I definitely think 2000 is the minimum you want to be at on this character. Ideally 2100 or again 2200 if you can actually get it there. For health, I have 15k. This is a good midpoint, I feel like, for a lot of Lionheart Cermias. I see a lot of them around 14k to 16k. 15k is obviously right there, square in the middle. And then the really insane ones that people have like crazy gear, you can get like 17k, for example. Speed is 190. You can go as low as about 170 to about as high as like 200 or 205. It depends entirely. 190 is about the average that I see. I personally play around 185. And in the past, I played Lionheart Cermias that are as slow as like 175. Granted, those ones were on Proof of Valor. Critical hit chance is 100% because we're a DPS and we need to ensure that we deal damage. Critical hit damage is 300%. This is actually a bit easier than you think because you're on Destruction set that has a hefty 60% critical hit damage built in, so it's not as bad as it looks. Around 310 or 320, I think, is where you really want to be on the character if you can swing it. I would say like 290, 300 is kind of the lower end of where you want to be on the Destruction build. Otherwise, there's not really a reason to play it. You should probably just use the Lifesteal build. As for effectiveness, not a debuffer. Effect resistance is 0%, although in the past I have played around 70% ER. Granted, that again was on the Lifesteal build. We'll talk more about that when we visit the Lifesteal build next. Taking a look at the right side, I'm on a critical hit chance necklace because, well, we're on Destruction set. That obviously does all the heavy lifting for critical hit damage, so we might as well get the most gear score efficient piece here at critical hit chance. Other sets kind of can't really afford to go for critical hit chance as the necklace, because then it becomes very difficult to get very high critical hit damage. Destruction set is the one set where you can really take advantage of the higher gear score that is afforded to you from the critical hit chance necklace. Ring is defense percentage. This is non-negotiable. This is what gives you all of the damage on the character as well as bulk. It does literally everything. I have seen other people, other players that I've been talking to recently in other discords, talking about how they just don't have a strong Lionheart Cermia. And every time I take a look at the ring, it's always either like attack percentage or health percentage. And I'm like, what are we doing here? It has to be defense percentage. If you don't have defense percentage as the ring, please farm it. You really can't play this character without it. Boots are going to be speed, so as always, we can take our turns in a timely fashion. As for artifact choice, Golden Rose is the way. Lionheart Cermia does not have good base stats. She relies on lifesteal or some way to recover health in order to make up for her incredibly poor base stats. So you can either go lifesteal on Proof of Valor as one way. The other way is just to have overwhelming offensive capability with an artifact like Golden Rose that gives you essentially innate lifesteal. Sigurd Scythe, I think, doesn't really cut it because it gives bonus attack, which is not really going to help you that much in sustaining. Golden Rose gives bonus damage percentage, which is obviously going to be quite a bit better. As for the average piece here, we are going to be on 17% defense, 17% health, 15% critical hit damage, and in the last spot, we're going to need speed or critical hit chance. If you have imprints on Lionheart Cermia, you only really need to pick up speed, because at that point, you'll get an extra 17% or so critical hit chance, in which case, with the necklace and the imprints at triple S, you only really need like 9% or so, like 8 or 9% leftover critical hit chance, which is super good. So if you can get critical hit chance imprints on this character, I recommend you do so. Just promise me you won't feed your only red Cermia to do so, because that character is still like triple S tier in my opinion in PvE. I see so many players feed their red Cermias to try to get the extra critical hit chance on their Lionheart, because it makes the gearing process so much easier. But again, please promise me you won't do that to my girl. She's still really, really good in PvE. Hopefully you can get imprints some other way, such as things like slates, or just using the story banner to actually pick up another copy of Red Cermia or two. The second build I want to talk about in this video is the traditional lifesteal build. This is all reliable. If you simply just don't have the gear to make Lionheart Cermia work on destruction set, or you don't have Golden Rose, or maybe you're just dying really often, then you could certainly give this one a whirl. This is the one I've been playing since the character came out, and it's the one I defaulted back to at the end of the previous season as of the recording of this video in my account review, because again, there's just something to be said about naturally having lifesteal and not relying on Golden Rose, and having the Proof of Valor artifact. It's still being played by some holdouts. Even in the legend rank, we see players like Elmage sometimes lose to these Proof of Valor Lionhearts because just they don't die. They're very difficult to kill, even though they don't have the best damage ability to actually carry a game. Taking a look at the primary sets, I'm on lifesteal with critical hit chance as the offset, because I think that's the easiest for most people to make work. You could absolutely play defense or health or immunity, although I do think immunity is kind of the worst of those. In the past, resist set has also worked, so if you want to have some effect resistance on your Cermia, so that way she doesn't get stripped by certain characters like Mediator Coeric or Unbound Knight Arwell, that's a possibility. Although Arwell does have an effectiveness buff in the kit, and Mediators nowadays are built with some level of effectiveness in the current meta, at least again as of the recording of this video. So I don't really feel like the effect resistance is that important, especially because you do have the cleanse on It's Far From Over. But if you want to, you could certainly go for resist set, and you can certainly play for more effect resistance. We'll talk about that in a second with the desired stats. Taking a look at the desired stats, I have 1608 attack. That is basically Lionheart Cermia's base attack with a 990 weapon with Proof of Valor. Defense is 2k, and health is at 15k. I think 15k is a really good baseline just in general for the health on this character, and 2000 is probably the lowest I would go on the defense. Previously on this build, I had 1900 when the character was still new, but nowadays, looking at the average for Lionheart Cermias that are kind of floating around the internet, 1900 is pretty much the lowest you see. 2k or 2100 is kind of where most characters, most players are at, I should say. And then the really high end ones are around like 23 or 2400, but those ones have made compromises or sacrifices elsewhere. I think 2100 is really where you want to be on Lionheart. So I mean, that feels like a really strong, solid number. And then 15k or higher health really helps. If you can only get like 14.5k, that's going to work as well. I caution you to go below 14k. Like if you're going to go below 14k, I think you're better off going with either the destruction build that we talked about or the speed build, because this one is primarily for people who are just trying to eke out a win by having a Lionheart Cermia that's incredibly difficult to kill. Speed is 185. I've seen as low as 170. I've played as low as like 175 in the past. I've seen as high as 200. So 185 is a pretty good midpoint. Critical hit chance is 100% because we're a DPS, want to hit as consistently as possible. 270 critical hit damage appears to be about the average score for a lot of Lionhearts nowadays, as high as 300. If you can get closer to 300, I highly recommend you do so. No effectiveness because we're not a debuffer, and effect resistance I have here at 0. But in the past, I have personally played 70 on your screen right now. This is my old build at 70. It was good in the past, but in the current meta as of the recording of this video, it's not super great. You do get the effect resistance buff from It's Far From Over, so that synergizes really, really well. So having 70 plus that buff is pretty good. Again, it just doesn't work as well against Hand Guy and ROL nowadays as compared to what it did in the past. Your mileage may vary. If you do want to go for ER, about 70 or 80 is a pretty good spot to be in. Taking a look at our right side pieces here, I'm on a critical hit damage necklace, a defense percentage ring, and boots are going to be speed, as always, to take turns in a timely fashion. You need the critical hit damage necklace to do as much damage as possible, and defense percentage ring, like we talked about, pretty much non-negotiable option. It gives you everything you want on the character. For artifacts, Proof of Valor is all reliable. It's what lets this build shine and what's made it so good for so long. It just makes you have a very difficult to kill Lionheart Cermia, and in the matches where you want it, like with Conqueror Lilius, they'll just keep fueling your S2 passive and let you just churn out a bunch of S3 I am the victors and win the game. Even if the damage is lower than destruction, you'll just get a high volume of them and they just won't be able to kill Cermia, which is why it's pretty good. For more damage but less survivability, Draco Plate is also certainly an option. I know I have friends that are in the higher tiers that have used this and have had a lot of success with it, so that is definitely an option. Look at the per piece average. It's 22% defense, 17% health, 12% critical hit chance, which can absolutely be lower, by the way, if you need imprints. Imprints are super huge, like we talked about on this character. And then finally, your choice of either critical hit damage or speed in the last spot. Which one it is, I leave it to you. The last build I want to talk about in this video is a pocket pick build for cleavers for Lionheart Cermia. In the previous video, we talked about a speed build for aggressive players, but that one didn't ever really take hold. What did take hold, again, is this pocket pick for cleavers. So how it works is essentially you take an opener, such as Ran or Peyra. Your opponent, expecting cleave, takes a counter cleave character, such as maybe a Bellion on an Elbrus Ritual Sword, or even Edward Elric to throw the debuffs back at you. You can then choose a very fast, aggressive glass cannon Lionheart Cermia to counter them. They will essentially counter you with their either Elbrus Ritual Sword, or again in this example, equivalent exchange off Edward Elric. It will proc the S2, It's Far From Over passive. You'll get the 20% CR push, and since you are built with no bulk and all damage on the character, you can use the S3 I am the victor and hopefully cleave through the entire enemy team. Taking a look at the primary sets, I'm on a speed set with a critical hit chance offset, although again, you could play defense, health, or immunity if you so choose. I guess destruction as a primary set could also work here, but I don't think I've ever seen any Lionheart Cermias actually play super fast with the destruction set. So your mileage may vary. Feel free to test it if you want. Looking at the desired stats, I'm on 1608 attack, again, base with a 990 weapon with the recommended artifact. Defense is 2k, although I recommend going to 2100 or even 2200 if you can afford it. Health is 11k. This is the average that I've found online for the cleave Cermias, but considering your primary cleaving, I don't really think the health total matters all that much. For speed, I have 230 here because I always try to keep the speed lower than where it actually is. The high end ones are like 240 or 250. The absolute lowest end ones are around 220. So again, whatever you can get faster is better. 240 plus seems to be where you really want to be on this. Critical hit chance is 100% for consistency. Critical hit damage is 300%, although I've seen as high as 320%, as low as around 275 or so for a cleave Cermia. More damage obviously is better. Higher defense, higher critical hit damage, higher speed. Those are the three numbers we're absolutely looking for on this build. Taking a look at our right side here, critical hit damage necklace, so we can do the most damage possible. Same thing with the ring, and boots as always are speed, so we can take the turn in a timely fashion. Artifact is Portrait of the Saviors because it gives us the most amount of burst damage off the rip. You could also use a Symbol of Unity if you want hit chance, so that way you can kind of snag Savior Auden, or maybe like Remnant Violet or Green Violet, something that somebody is trying to do to counter your actual cleave. Golden Rose also gives bonus damage and a little bit of sustain, so if you have some health, that's also a possibility you could go for. But I think Portrait of the Saviors is pretty much the safe pick. Look at the per piece average. It's 22% defense, 16% critical hit damage, 12% critical hit chance, again, if you don't have imprints, and then 9 speed per piece average. As always, let's round out this video with some matchup knowledge. If it's not already apparent from the skill section, Lionheart Cermia excels against characters that can proc her S2 passive. It's far from over consistently. That means you're going to play her into characters with high rates of counter, such as Bellion and Navy Captain Landy, characters that have guaranteed dual attacks in their kit, such as Conqueror Lilius and Solitary of the Snow, and characters that have a lot of forced extra attacks in their kit that you can control, such as Ocean Breeze Lulika or Edward Elric, which is a common character that is used against cleave comps, in which case you can really leverage that speed set aggressive Lionheart Cermia that we talked about in the build section. Moving on to bad matchups, Lionheart Cermia's biggest drawback is absolutely her poor HP pool. That means she's not particularly great against huge single target burst damage, and that can come in many different forms, from a character like Remnant Violet and his defense penetrating S3 Massacre, Symphony of Agony from Yulha, Call of the Abyss from Lethe, or even debuffers that have big burst potential like Pirate Captain Flan or Inferno Kawazu. Since most of Lionheart's power comes from her S2, it's far from over, by the way, you're incredibly susceptible to the Seal debuff featured on characters like Nakwal. Wrapping it up with the teammates for Lionheart Cermia, we've already discussed the fact that her biggest weakness is her poor HP pool, and she's also a hard carry that doesn't really provide any utility to your team, meaning she really wants a strong tank as well as great supports around her. For tanks, you have a number of great options, including a character like Arwell, who's incredibly defensive, as well as Peyra, who is very, very aggressive and pretty good for the cleave-based Lionheart. You also have a tank like Last Rider Crow that appears kind of squarely in the middle. He's kind of more of an all-rounder. As for supports, Maid Chloe is definitely a standout, even though she's not really in favor as of the recording of this video. Maid Chloe gives effect resistance to the team and is commonly played on the artifact Shamadra's staff to give more effect resistance to the team, meaning it synergizes very well with Cermia's S2 passive. It's far from over. If you decide to build effect resistance on your Lionheart Cermia, then Maid Chloe is definitely an option to consider. Other supports you could choose are characters like Ocean Breeze Lulika to help you double up on matchups that Cermia is already good in, most notably Conqueror Lilius. And speaking of doubling up on punishing things like dual attacks, extra attacks, and counterattacks, who else but Rowana would synergize really well with Cermia? And that's going to do it for How to Play Lionheart Cermia. Hopefully this guide was of some help to you. You can help me out by either liking the video or subscribing to the channel if you're not already. But most importantly, you can also help out a friend or guildmate by sharing this video with them. If you want to see more How to Play videos in this same style, there should be a playlist on your screen now. And do stay tuned for more new How to Play videos. I do have 2 guides in the works, and they should be coming through very, very shortly. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.